Hey guys, I'm here today to talk about the Women's Prize for Fiction long list for 2019. To be honest, I didn't even realise it was being announced so soon because it's being announced on the 4th of March, so not long at all. But I saw Eric's video that he uploaded where he chatted with Anna James this morning talking about all the books they predicted / hope will make it to the long list. And it just made me run to my bookshelves and sort of have a think about what books I've read that are eligible and what my general thoughts are on them. So I'm going to run you through the criteria for being eligible and then I'll explain what I'm going to be chatting about in this video. So the books have to have been published to be eligible for the 2019 long list. They have to have been published between the 1st of April 2018 and the 31st of March 2019. So it's always really difficult because some people will not predict a few books because they've not even come out before the long list is announced. So there's always a couple of surprise ones on there that people just haven't even thought about. So that's always quite exciting. They have to have been published in the UK for the first time between those dates. They could have been published in another country, before that, but within those dates they have to have been published for the first time in the UK. No translations are allowed, but they are allowed to be from authors from other nationalities, just as long as they're not translated. And they have to be more than 30,000 words. To be honest, I have no idea what 30,000 words looks like in terms of length, but I just know that's a rule. So what I decided to do after sort of thinking about how I wanted to structure this video is, rather than look through all the books that could possibly be eligible and make predictions, instead just to talk about the ones that I've read. So I've actually read 13 books that are eligible, which is not that many in the grand scheme of things, and I have around 15 other books that I currently own that I want to read that are also eligible, but I'm not going to talk about them here. I've hauled them in previous videos, you guys have probably seen them, but I do have a selection on my bookshelves that if they're on the long list, they're here and ready for me to dive into. So I thought out of the 13 I read, I would just run through them and talk about whether I think they're likely to make it to the long list, whether I want them to make it to the long list, whether they deserve to make it to the long list, all those things. Okay, so firstly, and this may seem a bit cruel, we have 3 books that I would rather not see on the long list, and there's probably loads of people who really like these books. These books have merits, but I didn't really enjoy them that much, and I would rather their space was utilised by another book. So the first one is The Mars Room by Rachel Kushner. It was one of those books I felt really conflicted about at the time, but the longer I've had away from it, the more I just think it was a bit of a forgettable book and also just a little bit annoying. And it made it to the Man Book Along list, so I feel like it doesn't deserve to be here as well. So I'd rather not see that one on the Women's Prize long list. The next one, and I feel quite mean doing this, is actually Melmoth by Sarah Perry. So I loved and adored The Essex Serpent by Sarah Perry, and I went into this with sort of tempered expectations because I didn't think I could love it as much as The Essex Serpent. Actually, I loved it quite a lot less. Actually, I didn't love it at all. So I felt like this was expertly written. Like, she has a skill with words. It was atmospheric, it was spooky, I could see all the places she described, the historical research was evident, but I never cared about the characters. They felt so distant and cold and remote, and I just couldn't have cared if all of them had died, and I think that's quite an intrinsic part of a story, especially when it's a spooky narrative about the fact that the protagonist could be, hurt by this Melmoth creature. If I don't care if she's hurt or not, then it sort of takes away the tension. So in some ways this book is an achievement. In a lot of other ways this was a real letdown, so I'd rather it didn't make it to the long list. Another one is a very recent release, and I actually didn't finish this one. I got about halfway through and just decided, what's the point, I'm not enjoying it that much, and there's plenty of other books that I'll enjoy a lot more, and that is The Dreamers by Karen Thompson Walker. As I said, this is quite a new release, it's very buzzy at the moment. This is set in a world where this pandemic is spreading, which makes people fall asleep, and they're dying in their sleep because they're not eating or drinking, and they're all having very active dreams, and it's focused in this small town in California where they're trying to contain this illness, and we're just watching people within the contained area and seeing how they cope. I just don't really like her writing style, in all honesty, and I'll talk about this a lot more in a review, but I got about halfway through and realised that it was really easy to keep turning the page, and I was sort of intrigued, but ultimately I didn't really care about any of the characters, didn't care if they all didn't survive this pandemic, which is an awful thing to say. And also, I didn't like the writing style, and there was a couple of things that I actually found a tad concerning / offensive, which again I'll talk about more in my review, so I'd rather this one wasn't on the long list. These next two are historical fiction books I actually read this month, and I have sort of differing views on them, but I don't think either of them will make the long list. I don't really think they're strong contenders at all. So the first one is The Story Keeper by Anna Mazzola, and I actually really enjoyed this one. I found it a really enjoyable sort of gothic mystery. This is set, God, I'm really bad at remembering timelines, in the 1800s on the Isle of Skye, and it follows a folklorist who's sent to the Isle of Skye to assist another woman in collecting folk tales from the local crofters, and then women's bodies start to appear, and it's this mystery as to what's happening. I enjoyed this. It was really fun to guess what was going to happen next. I just don't think this has done anything really unique or different in the genre of like gothic historical fiction, and you know, therefore I don't think it will really be recognised as a standout book, and I don't think it deserves to be either. So I'd recommend it as an enjoyable read, but it doesn't deserve, in my mind, to make it on any prize lists. So there's that one. And then the other one is Call of the Curlew by Elizabeth Brooks. I didn't enjoy this one anywhere near as much. I think this actually has quite a few problems. This is again a historical fiction set, I think, in the early 1900s for this one. Actually, I think it might be, yeah, during World War II. So yeah, there's that. Told you I'm bad at remembering time periods. So this follows a young girl who's sent to live on an area of land called the Salt Winds Marshes. She's taken out of an orphanage to live with this couple. And very early on in the novel, the man walks onto the marshes and never comes back, and is replaced by a man who we know to be the survivor of a German plane crash in the marshes. And it's this mystery and all this stuff is going on. A good idea, but it doesn't really reach its climax like it should, and also there's just lots of things that aren't properly explained and sort of draw all tension out of the book. So I don't think this one will make it to the list. The next one is one that I think could make it to the list and probably has a really strong chance of being there. And I wouldn't mind if it was there, but I didn't love it. And that's A Place for Us by Fatima Farheen Mirza. Now this is an odd one because this was actually the book that I was reading when I'd started reading it, and I found out that my stepdad had died very suddenly. And so I stopped reading for a long time. And then weeks and weeks later I decided I'd like to try and take my mind off things by reading again, and so I picked this back up. So I'm well aware that this may have suffered because of the fact that in my mind it will always be connected to a difficult period, and also perhaps whatever was going on in this novel wasn't enough to take me out of that, and therefore I judged it more harshly. I'm not sure. It's really difficult to sort of objectively view this one. I think in many ways it's quite a strong narrative. In other ways I felt like it never really properly, I felt like it was reaching for something and the author had the ability to get there, but she just never grasped it. So I feel like I'll follow her as an author, but I didn't think this was her like amazing book. I feel like she has more in her and this just wasn't quite there, but I think it has a good chance of making the long list, so we shall see. These next two books are books I really enjoyed. I didn't completely love them, they're not without faults, but I really enjoyed them, and I'm not desperate to see them on the long list, but if they're there I'll be happy for them and it'll be really cool to see them there. So the first one is 5 Days of Fog by Anna Freeman. This is again a historical fiction, we have got a few of those on my list, and this follows a violent girl gang in London. It's sort of like Peaky Blinders in London with women. It's pretty cool, and it follows them as the leader of this girl gang is released from prison, and her daughter actually wants to leave the gang and marry this man, which is something that they don't do. They always marry within gang, and he's not a gang member. And it follows this drama as people are trying to disrupt the gang, people are grassing them up to the police, and they're trying to find out who within their ranks is doing that, and there's this real power struggle for who will carry on leading this girl gang. I really enjoy Anna Freeman's writing style. This was just a really fun book. I didn't think this was completely amazing, but I'd recommend it and it'd be cool to see it on the list, so we shall see. And this next one is Tears and the Prince of Crows by Deborah K. Davies. Now, in some ways I loved this. The writing style is incredibly descriptive and lyrical. Some people would hate this book. I really love the writing style. It's also deeply filled with nostalgia. It's focused on a young girl in a Welsh village who has a very oppressive religious upbringing, and she doesn't really care for it, and she makes lots of quite quick decisions that aren't really explained, and it's really just following her through a couple of years. It's a really slow book and very much focused on descriptive nature writing. So in some ways I really enjoyed this book, and in some ways I felt like it could have been edited down a bit too long for what it was. But yeah, I'd be happy to see this one there, but I think it's unlikely, and I'm not desperate for it to be there. Okay, so now I have my top 3, and these are the 3 that I think deserve to be there and I'd also really like to see there. So I think one of these is not going to surprise anybody, so I'll save that one until last. The first one is All Among the Barley by Melissa Harrison. Now, I didn't give this book 5 stars, but I really loved it. It was very near 5 stars, and it's a book that I think deserves more people talking about it. Like, I've barely heard anyone mention it. It really wasn't, I don't think it had a big marketing push behind it, or much of a marketing push at all that I saw. Like, I didn't see anyone get sent review copies. So yeah, I feel like this one just disappeared a little bit, and it's a real worthwhile read. It's another historical fiction, of course. This is me we're talking about here. This is making me realise quite how much historical fiction I read, or that at least in new releases that seems to be what I reach for. So this one is set in the 1930s, and it's set in a small Suffolk farming village. I'm from Suffolk, so I really loved this book for that. And we follow a young girl as an older woman comes to her village to write about fading rural traditions, and she gets really taken in by this woman and sort of sees her for something that she isn't, and various things start to happen in this local village, and there's elements of fascism, elements of witchcraft, all these sort of family secrets, and this is just beautifully constructed. It's a really slow moving family drama. The nature writing is again beautiful. Really enjoyed this. Very much focused on the seasons, so if you like reading books that really make the landscape and the seasons a character in themselves, then this does that. I really enjoyed this. I thought the ending was great, and it's one that I always sort of think back on, and I found the ending really emotional. So I'd like to see this one there, and I think it deserves to be there, so fingers crossed. The next one, I don't know if it's eligible, to be honest, but if it is, it should 100% be there, and that's Ghost Wall by Sarah Moss. So they have to be over 30,000 words to be there, and I don't know if this is. Like, it's about 150 pages, fairly large font. I feel like I heard her say in an interview this was 50,000 words, but I could have completely made that up. And I tried to check online and I can't find it referenced anywhere. If this is over 30,000 words, then it 100% deserves to be there. It's such a strong book. It has so many different things going on in it, but they're all so perfectly handled, and to fit so much into one book and for them all to be nuanced and not like overtly like, look at me, I'm here, is amazing. And I have thought about this book nearly every day since I've read it. It's one I think about and always think, God, that scene, or God, that sentence, or the way she pulled it all together, or I want to read it again. Like, it's such a strong book. I'm not really going to say what it's about because it's very short, but like, very quickly, this is set in the present time, and it follows a teenage girl and her parents as they go to relive an Iron Age experience, and with an academic and some university students, and it comments on, you know, the clash of class, gender roles, so many other things. It is phenomenal. You guys know I love Sarah Moss, and I really want this one to be on the list, so fingers crossed it's eligible and they choose it. And then lastly, I'm not going to bang on about this one because we all know I want it to be there, Normal People by Sally Rooney. I'll be really shocked if this isn't there, and if it isn't, then they must have had a really fraught discussion when they decided to not put this there, because I think if I was choosing for this year's list, I would know that everyone's expecting to see this one. So it feels like a really big statement to not put it there. We shall see. On the one hand, I feel like Sally Rooney has enough attention, and other authors like these two would benefit from the publicity more, and that's part of what prizes like the Women's Prize are designed for. I still feel like Sally Rooney has earned her place, and I feel like this, if there, would have a strong chance of winning. Obviously, I have no idea what else it would be up against. As I said, I haven't even read anywhere near the amount of books that are eligible, but I feel like this one should be there. So I feel like having read 13 books that are eligible and only like selecting 3 out of those 13 that I like 100% would want there, that's quite interesting and quite exciting, because they usually choose 16 books and they always say they're going to make it smaller and then they don't. So that means that I'd be happy to see sort of 13 new to me books. You know, I may have heard of them but I won't have read them. So yeah, I'm really excited. So let me know if you've read any of these and what your thoughts on whether they should make the list or not are. Also, I'd love it if you go back through your reading history, find out how many you've read, and out of how many you've read, how many would you like to see on the list and what are they? I always find this so interesting, and it's a really interesting prize to follow. So yeah, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video.